Okay, so this is it. This is week 2 of the Tempest. This is the last week. Let's just do it. Ooh, hesitating. Come on, there we go. Okay, so where we left off, Act 3, Scene 1, we've got the big old romance scene here between Ferdinand and Miranda. And you see Ferdinand is carrying logs. He's doing these menial tasks, this labor that Prospero wants him to do. So Miranda doesn't want this for him, obviously, and she wants to rid him of this burden. She offers to carry them for him, in fact, and says that it'll be easier for her because she is a willing participant, because she wants to make the burden less for him, whereas he does not want to do it. Of course, he won't let her because he's a gentleman, and he doesn't want her carrying logs any more than he wants himself carrying logs. So this whole scene that we get with them, we know from the beginning the basis of their relationship is appearances, because they fell in love so very quickly. But it's a very beautiful scene in a lot of ways. It's really romantic. They have this really nice, genuine conversation here. There's a lot of really pretty lines here, like, I would not wish any companion in the world but you. To me, that's one of my favorite of Shakespeare's romantic lines that Miranda says. And in fact, she's the one who proposes marriage to him. And she's like, okay, I'm just going to come out with it. I'm going to stop being coy. And says this great line, all the more talking about her love for him and everything. Being coy doesn't work. She's just going to be straightforward, because all the more it seeks to hide itself, the bigger bulk it shows, which is great. The more I try to pretend I'm not feeling these things, the more obvious it is to everybody involved that I am. So she does. She says, I am your wife if you will marry me. And she loves him, obviously. She's naive, but she loves him. Oh my gosh. Dropbox, get out of here. And she sees herself as an equal, because she proposed to him. She doesn't understand the general social construct of the man proposing marriage. She doesn't have the societal education that we all have, that he has. And I asked you to think about what makes her different for that. We know that she's a very educated woman. She's got this education that Prospero was able to give her, and he even talks about, we mentioned how he was able to give her more attention because they were on the island than she would have gotten back in Milan when he was the Duke. So she doesn't know that she's not supposed to offer to carry logs. She doesn't know she's not supposed to propose to him. He doesn't seem to mind at all. And he says yes. And the whole time, to kind of undercut the romance of it all, Prospero is watching. And he's very pleased with the progress of everything. But it's interesting, I think, to examine how much he needs to have control. He's simultaneously the audience, and the director, as I'm pretty sure we've already mentioned. Anyway. Next scene, Act 3, Scene 2, we're back to the conspiracy again, to kill the king, or to kill people in general, and not kill the king, I'm sorry, jumping ahead. But the point is, there is something about this play that doesn't let evil work. What is it about the genre? What is it about, and this play in particular, what is it about the structure of this play that makes this conspiracy fall apart? They immediately start fighting within each other. They don't trust each other. The only weapon that's used against them is Ariel yelling, "Thou liest!" And then they just start, yelling and getting mad, and Trinculo is suddenly untrustworthy by Stefano, and Caliban doesn't like Trinculo, and it's just this big thing, and it's all based on this worship that Caliban has in their bond together. The three of them is based on survival and on liquor, and that's about it. but it raises an interesting point, because why these characters here they're plotting bad things, but they're the comic relief. So why are the evil characters in this play here especially made comic? It's obviously not a common occurrence outside of perhaps in comedy as well, but here we get it here in our romance. So what does that mean about the genre? What does that say about what we're supposed to feel and expect of them? And then Caliban says that he knows how to conquer Prospero. So he knows how to take him down and get rid of him, so that they can all be the kings of the island, and Caliban will serve them. Well, serve Stefano, serve the bottle, certainly, and after they overthrow his old master. But anyway, so he says that his books and his cloak are the source of his power. And so he's directing them, teaching them how to commit a new sort of regicide, the king of the island, I suppose. So maybe I wasn't wrong in the beginning. I was confused, but it worked out. How similar is this scene to the one with Sebastian and Antonio? You know, these two scenes seem to mirror each other. They're both plotting this overthrow, one of the island and one of Naples, you know, and earlier, of course, of Prospero in Milan. All these overthrows, and then Ariel comes. But in both of these scenes, Ariel comes and causes chaos for them and disrupts their evil plot. And so, in what other ways are these characters? Is all of this similar? At this point, Caliban, who is definitely debased and is ridiculous looking in many, many ways, is given this little redemptive moment where he talks about how he sees the island, and that's here. And he's telling them that he'll show them all the secrets of the island, and he says, "The isle is full of noises, sounds and sweet airs that give delight and hurt not. Sometimes 1,000 twangling instruments will hum about mine ears, and sometime voices that, if I then had waked after long sleep, will make me sleep again. And then, in dreaming, the clouds methought would open and show riches ready to drop upon me, that when I waked I cried to dream again." This is a very, very well quoted speech from this play. In fact, at the London Olympics, during the opening ceremony, they had Kenneth Branagh, who's a famous Shakespearean actor, as you well know, because he starred in Much Ado About Nothing. He also did a version of Hamlet that was very good, unabridged, so make sure you've got 3 hours to spare before you sit down to watch that one. But anyway, during the opening ceremonies for the London Olympics, Kenneth Branagh recited this speech. Out of all the speeches in all of Shakespeare, he recited this speech that ends with, "When I waked, I cried to dream again." So it's definitely a beautiful ode to the island, to nature in general, and it's in Caliban's mouth, right? So we've seen this before a little bit. We've seen how he showed Miranda and Prospero the island, showed them, you know, all the best of the island, what to avoid, even the secrets. He says the secrets of the island, because it was his and it was his mother's Sycorax's. They were the only ones there. This speech here really serves to elevate Caliban, you know, above his slavery, above his drunkenness, above his ignorance, not knowing better in so many different circumstances, culturally and otherwise. A lot of this play makes Caliban look foolish, and we've talked about this, you know. Makes him look like a monster, displays him in this, you know, even semi-inappropriate light. But not this, right? Not this. This is beautiful. This is a speech that could be put in the mouths of any of Shakespeare's best soliloquists. So, what was the point in making him sympathetic? You know, what does that suddenly do to Caliban? You know, gives him a real voice, makes him a real character, makes him more than just this one-dimensional thing. And so I talked last time about, you know, not necessarily saying one way or the other what Shakespeare's opinion was about native people, but I think that this is an important moment for Caliban when you talk about him overall as a character, because the island is such a big part of him, and the way he describes it here with these learned words, this learned speech, not the ability for speech that he was taught by Prospero and Miranda. So, Act 3, Scene 3. I've called it the Feast of Guilt, for fun, I guess. So, in this scene we return to Alonso and company as they're roaming about, and Alonso has officially lost all hope and decided that his son has passed, and Gonzalo is trying to cheer him, and it's, you know, this whole desperate mess. And then all of a sudden, you know, this feast appears in front of them, and they're not entirely sure what to do about it. At the same time, we know that Prospero is there, and he's invisible, watching the whole thing, because Prospero is a voyeur, and he watches everything in this play. Gonzalo says, you know, travelers are coming back every day from new lands, talking about these unbelievable but true events, and this might just be such an event as that. So again, tying it back to the real world happenings of the exploration that the English were really embarking on at this time, you know, and discovering new worlds. So making this seem relevant and set in their present day. So they do decide to eat. They all get ready to eat. But wait! All of a sudden, Ariel appears and as a harpy. And a harpy, it should say in your books, is a monster described as having a human head, usually a woman's head, on a bird's body with wings and claws to match. And the Ariel harpy claps the wings on the table, and the food vanishes. I think it'd be interesting to see that done in performance. You know, how do you do that? And he mocks the men for attempting to draw their weapons. He's obviously made it so that they can't. And he says that he's an instrument of fate and destiny. And he accuses Alonso and Sebastian and Antonio of driving Prospero from Milan, driving them and leaving him and his daughter to the mercy of the sea. He says for this sin, the natural world has exacted revenge by taking Ferdinand. And so this is what you get. This is the real world punishment that you get for what you did. Prospero's on the side like, yeah, you're crushing it, Ariel. This is exactly what I wanted you to do. Okay, now leave and go. And he leaves and he goes to mess with somebody else. And so at this point, it's this interesting scene of confrontation, right? This is the big moment where Prospero gets to make it known the wrong that was done to him through Ariel. And so Alonso, this whole time, what do we think about Alonso as a character? He doesn't seem too terribly bad, but we know that he aided in kicking Prospero out of Milan. And so Alonso, when he hears this, he's got this speech here. And so it's interesting to examine what the different men do when they are confronted with this news. And Alonso says, "Oh, it is monstrous, monstrous. Methought the billows spoke and told me of it. The winds did sing it to me, and the thunder, that deep and dreadful organ pipe, pronounced the name Prospero. It did base my trespass. Therefore my son in the ooze is bedded, and I'll seek him deeper than e'er plummet sounded, and with him there lie in the mud." So he's like, oh my gosh, I did this thing, and because of it my son's dead, and so I'm going to join him. And so he runs off to drown himself at this news. He's so upset is he by the idea that this thing that he did has come back on him so horribly. Anyways, at the same time, I should say, Sebastian and Antonio decide they're going to fight the spirits, just like they're going to fight everything else. They're going to fight a good mood off. And so they run off to do that. And Gonzalo is like, the rest of you, run after them, save those idiots. He doesn't say idiots, that's my word. My choice. But point is, Gonzalo's being the good dude, per usual. Sorry, guys. Allergies. So, in the next scene, we see Prospero apologize to Ferdinand, and he explains why he tested him. He just says, Miranda means so much to me. I couldn't give her to somebody who was unworthy. Ferdinand says, and they go into a little bit of awkward talk for us today, being like, but don't you dare sleep with her before your wedding. And Ferdinand's like, nope, I promise I won't. And Miranda's just like, just standing there while my dad and my husband talk about the wedding night. That's normal, right? Not as weird back then. And what would Miranda know, living on an island, about what's normal? Anyway. So for a gift, as a wedding gift, Prospero gives them a mask, a wedding mask. Masks are performances, so it's another play within a play. It's a performance within a performance. And masks, M-A-S-Q-U-E, was a performance, mythological in subject, as we've talked about. This is during the Renaissance, so the plays were about mythological characters from the Greek and Roman myths. And so this one, is about some of the goddesses. They have elaborate costumes. They have a lot of dancing and music, and they have really elaborate sets, which is different than the plays that Shakespeare writes and wrote, like he's currently writing. I wish. Wrote and had staged. Those had much more simple sets, but masks were a little bit more elaborate. It is worth noting, to put this in a little bit of historical context, in the winter of 1612, 1613, The Tempest, along with some other plays, were actually performed in honor of the marriage of King James's daughter, Elizabeth, to Frederick. And so a lot of scholars think, a normal number of scholars think that the Prospero's mask was added in by Shakespeare just for this performance, so that there would be a fancy mask to perform for King James's daughter at court. But there's no hard proof that it wasn't part of the play originally. But anyway, this mask is here, and this play was performed for King James and his daughter at her wedding. So that's kind of neat, isn't it? I think so. I'm sorry, my throat hurts. But this is our last lecture, so I'm gonna keep on keeping on, and we're gonna go out with a bang. So getting back to the mask itself, Ceres, the goddess Ceres, played by Ariel, and Iris. Ceres is the goddess of the harvest and good, like, nature and things like that. And Iris is the goddess of peace and communication and agriculture, so they're very hand in hand are there. And Venus and Cupid are talked about, but told that they will not be there, which is kind of an interesting way to sort of dismiss erotic love while embracing marriage. Venus was the goddess of love, I think, as we all know, and Eros, sorry, not Eros, Cupid. Well, Eros and Cupid doesn't, anyway. Dive into that too deeply. Cupid, the archer who makes people fall in love very suddenly, they're very linked to passion, physical intimacy and physical love and that sort of thing. But then there's Juno, and Juno is the wife of Jupiter / Zeus. It's Juno / Hera, Zeus / Jupiter, depends if it's Roman or Greek. But anyway, point is, Juno is the goddess of marriage. And so she arrives with gifts and things like that, and so the idea is that this is a celebration of union, of marital love rather than passionate love, which is interesting. Anyway, so all this is being acted out, and Ferdinand says, may I be so bold as to think these spirits. And Prospero's like, yes, they are spirits. I called them, they're mine, and I summoned them for the two of you. You're welcome. So it's an interesting little aside, calling attention to art, to the structure of the play, and then the interruption. It's also, I think, interesting too because it's a lot like Hamlet, right? Who kept interrupting the play, and so all of a sudden, right within the middle of the play, all of the actors that we've been watching on stage become the audience, and so it's not breaking the fourth wall officially, but it's sort of acknowledging the existence of a fourth wall and creates a second fourth wall. In case you're unfamiliar, the fourth wall refers to, like, when you're looking into your computer right now. This right here, this main screen here is the fourth wall. On stage, it's the wall, or the lack of one, that separates the audience from the actors. And so breaking the fourth wall means to acknowledge that you're in a play, or acknowledge that you're in a movie. I don't know if you watch Deadpool. Deadpool likes to do this. He breaks the fourth wall all the time. He acknowledges that he's in a movie. When narrators talk directly to the audience and say, I know what you're thinking. Like that kind of thing is breaking the fourth wall. Anyway, so this is like creating a second fourth wall because now they're watching a play as we're watching them watch a play. And then Prospero interrupts again and is like, oh crap, I forgot about Caliban's stupid plot to kill me. Oh, I gotta go do something about that. Which I think is really funny. Because he's so not worried about it that in his entire scheming and machinating and planning this all out, he forgot that Caliban and his new masters had decided they were gonna kill him. And he has to go do something about that. So, mask over. In response to Ferdinand's question about his very sudden, Prospero's very sudden change of mood, Prospero then gives this beautiful speech about these wonders, about this magic that he's conjured up for them, and talks about how much like life, we melt into the air eventually. And it's this speech that's on the screen right here. I'm going to move that just a little. So it says, our revels now are ended. So the revel's talking about, the mask that they just watched, the revelry, but also, a lot of people consider this speech to be Shakespeare's farewell to this stage, to like a farewell to theater in general. Other people think it's a tribute, to human accomplishment. It could be all these things. We'll just read it and I'll show you. Our revels now are ended. These are actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air, which into thin air came from this. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself. Here's a great, double meaning for you, because we know that the name of the theater, it was the globe. And so when he talks about the globe itself, he could be talking about the theater, or he could be talking about, the entire planet full of these wondrous things. So the great globe itself, ye all which it inherit shall dissolve, and like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a wreck behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. So, it's very much a farewell. Is it a farewell to just the mask, or to the play? The play's drawing to an end. Is that what he's talking about? Is Shakespeare really talking about, was it his intention for this to be his final play? All sorts of things. It's very difficult not to read that sort of romantic ending into it, knowing what we know now, that he would never write another full-length play that we know of again. So, all stuff to think about, all stuff to imbue this play so much meaning and so much to contemplate, and I'm gonna move on now. Okay, so Act 4, Scene 1 continued. He's got to go deal with this conspiracy. Again, with the conspiracies that fail. Why does this one fail here? Is it because they're drunk? Probably. They put on the clothing, they fall for this bait, and what is it? Just greed, stupidity, drunkenness, like, let's just dive in. So you got your three fools, and Ariel is talking about how they were red hot with rage, also drunk, and so he led them into a cesspool, and now they're up to their necks in sewage, and then they'll bemoan later that they very sadly lost their liquor bottle in the sewage. So Prospero's like, cool, hang all my nice linens up on the lawn to tempt them, like right outside his cell as bait. And so he curses Caliban for being a devil, and Prospero promises, ooh, you wascally wabbit, kind of thing. Promise to plague all of these men, these three men that are plotting against his life. So now, then you see Caliban and Trinculo and Stefano, and they've escaped from the sludge. They've escaped the cesspool, and they all smell of cesspool. And again, even with that being the case, the greatest tragedy is that they lost their booze. Caliban assures them, on their hunt across the island to find and take down Prospero, that it'll all be worth it. And he eggs them onto Prospero's cell. So, sorry. Just as Stefano and Trinculo start to have thoughts about bloody murder, Trinculo points out what nice things are hanging on the line there. It's like a king's wardrobe. Dang. And so the two men get distracted and completely lack focus. And Caliban is like, oh my gosh, we're right next to Prospero's cell, and this is the moment you choose to, like, lose it? He's sure that Prospero's gonna come out and find them and torture them. And he would know. So, sure enough, he's right. And Ariel conjures up a bunch of, spirit dogs. Let's call them spirit dogs. Spirit hounds that chase the three of them off. And Prospero promises that there'll be plenty of cramps and pinches and convulsions for them. Like an old man shaking his fist at you, being like, "Get off my lawn!" As they run away, chased by his angry spirit dogs. So, now that that's all taken care of, he goes on to the bigger revenge, right? And in this scene, we see the beginning. We see this moment for this revenge fantasy that Prospero's had. It's time to enact it. To get even with all of the guys who wronged him. And he doesn't. He doesn't do it. Prospero's, skepticism, he's talking to Ariel and he wants to know what the guys are doing, and Ariel meets that skepticism with pity, and he says, your affections, to see them now, your affections would become tender. And Prospero's like, dost thou think so, spirit? And he says, mine would, sir, if I were I human, being like, I'm a spirit and I have more compassion than you for your own kind of thing. And Prospero's like, all right, mine shall too then. He says, hast thou, which art but air, a touch, a feeling of their afflictions? And shall not myself, one of their kind, that relish all as sharply passioned as they? Relish all as sharply passioned as they? Be kindlier moved than thou art? Nay, the rarer action is in virtue than in vengeance. And that is a big line and a big theme in this play. The rarer action is in virtue than in vengeance. It's a lot easier to get angry and take revenge. It's a lot harder to forgive, the high road, taking the high road on this. And so he decides he's going to do it. So with that in mind, we get all the way to the end of the play, Act 5, Scene 1, and Prospero decides that he's not going to seek revenge after all. What does that make possible? Now Prospero can face his enemies, with the same amount of power as them, because he says, "My charms I'll break, and they shall be themselves." He'll return them back to the way they were. This rough magic I here abjure, except to play some heavenly madness, and I like, or heavenly music, and the idea that music cures madness, I think is a really interesting one, and something that could be examined even more deeply. I think I love that the idea that music cures madness, or could, especially because so many of the people originally were led astray by a certain type of music. So heavenly music curing madness. Anyway. So, obviously it's interesting because things are going a little off track now because, depending on how you look at it, because a proper revenger, confronts their wrongers, lists their crimes, kills them, and then dies. Just look at Hamlet. Hamlet is typical. And nothing about Hamlet is typical, but Hamlet is a good example of a revenge tragedy, and yet Prospero decides no. Prospero decides not to be like Hamlet. He decides to choose forgiveness, and that has a lot of religious connotations in this play. I know last time we talked a lot about redemption, and how redemption is a really big part of this, and so. This is a very Christian concept, the idea of giving somebody forgiveness, even if they don't deserve it, choosing virtue over revenge, letting it go, that sort of stuff, because it's not about whether or not they've earned it, because according to Christianity, salvation wasn't earned by people. It was freely given to sinners, to people who were not worthy. And so revenge would be the human way to go, and forgiveness would be the divine way to go. So it's a very, very heavy concept in this play, which is interesting too, because that's juxtaposed very much against the mage sort of, the spells and the pagan and things like that, and yet it's got very heavily Christian overtones, which is a really good way to talk about the Renaissance period, because the Renaissance was a time very much of Christianity, but it was also a rebirth of, the classical ways of thinking and classical art, and, just getting enjoyment out of the stories of the classical gods and goddesses and that sort of stuff, even in a very Christian time. I have allergies. My throat is so scratchy. So, choose divine forgiveness. That's what he picks, and he says that he's gonna put down all of his magic. He renounces it. He even has a little conjuring of sorts. He draws a circle while he almost casts a spell. It's like Macbeth does. Macbeth conjures the witches, but I think you'd all agree that it's also very, very different at the same time than Macbeth. Very different than Macbeth, very different than the Weird Sisters. The magic is just different. But also the way that he talks about it, how are his powers, think about, because I'm going to read it. How are his powers described in a magical way, and how are his powers talked about in a theatrical way? The power of the stage and illusion and things like that. are very heavily tied into this play. Magic and theater, all in one. So Prospero, it says, Prospero draws a large circle on the stage with his staff, is the stage direction. And then it says, you elves of hills, brooks, standing lakes and groves, and you that on the sands with printless foot do chase the ebbing Neptune, and do fly him when he comes back, you demi-puppets that by moonshine do the green sour ringlets make, whereof the yew not bites, and you whose pastime is to make midnight mushrooms, that rejoice to hear the solemn curfew, by whose aid, weak masters though you be, I have bedimmed the noontide sun, called forth the mutinous winds, and twixt the green sea and the azured vault, turn the page, set roaring war. To the dread rattling thunder have I given fire, and ripped at Jove's stout oak with his own bolt. Remember, Jove is, what's wrong with me? Jove is Jupiter. He's the Roman king of the gods. Blank for a second. Jove is Jupiter. I don't know what I said earlier. I feel like whatever I said was wrong. But it's Jove / Jupiter. Now we're on the same page. I'm going to keep reading. And ripped Jove's stout oak with his own bolt. So, Jove was the goddess of the oak tree and also the goddess. The god of oak trees and also of thunder and lightning. So, he's saying, I knocked down an oak tree with thunder. I knocked down, I had that kind of power to do that. The strong-based promontory have I made shake, and by the spurs plucked up the pine and cedar. Graves at my command have waked their sleepers. Zombies, oped and let them forth by my so potent art. He brought people back from the dead, y'all. But this rough magic I here abjure, and when I have required some heavenly music, which even now I do, boom, music plays. Heavenly music makes you not insane. This is the stage direction says Prospero gestures with his staff, and I guess that's what I'm doing. Anyway, quick, another side note since we're just doing this. I joke, I say zombies, but did Prospero really bring people back from the dead? Or again, that's part of why people think he might be talking about the stage is, history plays, and we've even talked about Macbeth as an actual historical figure. And so acting them out on stage brings them back from the dead, and to be like that good of a playwright, that good of an actor for the one reading it, to be able to do that, that's could be an underpinning meaning of this speech, and so many other things made you feel this way, made you see these sorts of things by engaging your imagination so fully is sort of the vibe here. So you guys know this. You figured it out because I told you to think about the theater while I was reading this, and you've been doing it. We're going to keep going. Alright, so, gesturing. We're back to gesturing. Okay. To work mine end upon their senses, that this airy charm is for. I'll break my staff, bury it certain fathoms in the earth, and deeper than did ever plummet sound, I'll drown my book. So he's going to bury all this stuff and get rid of all of it. He's like, I've done all these things, it's been amazing, I've done it. And you've been amazed, and now I'm going to give it up. I'm going to become a regular dude again. And again, multiple different meanings here. Give up the stage, give up the magic, all that stuff. And he gives it up at the same time that he gives up this idea of revenge, too. So, anyway. A lot there. A lot. Including my fantastic reading. Okay, so now, everybody comes back. Everybody's brought back in by this magic, and Prospero. Ooh, I forgot his name. Oh my goodness. Claritin, man. I need some Claritin. So Ariel arrives dragging these people in front of Prospero. And they all stand in this magic circle that we all drew together. We all did it together, guys. Charmed into being there. Ooh. And Prospero addresses each of them. He speaks to Gonzalo first and tears up as he thanks him for being his true preserver and for remaining so loyal to whomever it is that he serves. So he's not even mad at Gonzalo for serving Alonso because he just appreciates the loyalty. And also he's decided to forgive Alonso, right? So it doesn't matter anymore. But he's so grateful because remember, Gonzalo is the one who provided, he knew that he had to send him off in this ship, in this boat, this dinghy, with his daughter, but he didn't send them off empty-handed. He provided them rich clothing and food and these books that Prospero values more than anything else. And so he's eternally grateful to Gonzalo, and he expresses that. He then chides Alonso for treating him and Miranda so poorly. And I love that. I don't know if I just have terribly low expectations, but I just really appreciate that throughout this, Prospero seems to always remember Miranda. So it's not just, you took my dukedom to me, dukedom from me, and you ruined my life. It's always, you overthrew me, and you sent myself and my poor daughter, my child, my itty-bitty baby in a boat with me. She wasn't an itty-bitty baby. I was being dramatic. And so he chides Alonso for this and says Sebastian too suffers for wronging them. Finally, Prospero comes to his no-good brother, Antonio, and Prospero reveals their plot to murder the king. He alludes to it, and then he says, but I forgive you anyway. How do the these men respond to these accusations? Alonso is, very much like, oh my gosh, what is happening right now? Is this real? Am I here? What day is it? What year is it? No, he's just very much, flabbergasted by all of this, but he asks for forgiveness. Sebastian doesn't believe him and is like, oh no, the devil speaks in you, and gets all. And then Antonio, maybe even worse than that, says and does nothing, And this is the guy that this whole time, we've sort of been like, oh man, I can't wait to see how Prospero gets back at his awful brother. And then the play ends, and Prospero forgives him, and Antonio has like this moment, and he doesn't have a line here, so it's all up to the actor. What does the actor do? Antonio and Sebastian have been kind of together throughout the play, like same sort of vibe the whole time, just chilling like bros. So is he with Sebastian here? Is he just like, no, you crazy, I don't think you're my brother, I think you're a spirit and the devil probably. Is he embarrassed? Is he repentant? You can really change this scene a lot as the actor who plays Antonio with your subtleties. Prospero then notes that, the group, while this is all happening, I'm jumping around a little bit. You know this about me. He says you may not recognize me, and has Ariel bring him his hat and his sword so he can get all dressed up again so that they can know him as the man that he was, the old genuine Duke of Milan. And as Ariel dresses Prospero, for the 1500th time, Prospero's like, man, Ariel, you did a great job. You did a great job. Now you only got to do one more thing. Bring me the sleeping mariners from the ship, and you'll be free. Gonzalo and all the shipwrecked gang, all of them look on. Gonzalo's my fave. you know, and they're all talking about, you know, unsure about whether or not this is more enchantment or if Prospero is really before them. Alonso, like we talked about, returns his dukedom to him. You know, is repentant, and says wants to know everything. How'd you survive on the island? Like, oh my goodness, dude. And Prospero's like, yes. This story is for another time. We don't want to make all these people in the audience listen while I retell everything they just saw. So he kind of brushes it off and is like, I'll tell you later. And King Alonso brings up the loss of his son, Ferdinand. And Prospero very cryptically says that he's also lost a daughter. They've both lost children to the Tempest, which is, we know that, you know, he's only kind of being truthful, but it occurred to me while I was writing this that in a way he does lose a daughter, because when you marry off a daughter, she no longer lives with you, she's no longer there, she goes and lives with her husband. And so in a way you do lose a daughter when you marry her to your son, to a son, someone's son, anyone's son. So he could, it could be, you know, kind of reference to that. But anyway, he's like, yes, we've both lost a child to this Tempest. Again, the story of how this all came to be is not the sort of thing that we can really hash out in a single setting. You'd have to write a whole play about it. But I'll tell you over the course of long days. In the meantime, let's entertain ourselves with other things. Perhaps, for instance, you would like to take a look at my cell where I've been living. And he draws back the little curtain. Ta-da! Just kidding, your son's alive. And he's in love with my daughter, and they're married. Sorta, in the island way. In the island way, they're married. But anyway, so he draws back the curtain, and they're playing chess. And Miranda is accusing Ferdinand of cheating. Right off the bat in the marriage, he's cheating at chess. Great. That's great. But, so, it brings up the thought about, okay, why did he say that to begin with? Why did he trick Alonso at all? Why didn't he just tell him his son was alive when he revealed himself? But there is this idea, and I know we've talked about, like, the whole, like, the more delayed, delighted idea earlier on, but there's also the idea, and again, it's kind of another, comes in with these Christian overtones, this idea that through grieving and then revealing, you receive providence, you receive redemption. Like the lamentation, the sadness, you know, heightens the ecstasy of finding him alive. You know, like if somebody told you that, you know, they had tickets for you for a concert, and they're like, no, just kidding, I don't. And you're like, oh no, I was really bummed, I wanted to go. And then they're like, just kidding, I do. Not exactly like that, because then you think that they were a schmuck. But if it came back around that you could then go, the idea is then that you would be even more excited because you knew what it was like to want it and not be able to have it and then have it again. So I don't know if that was a horrible description. It probably was. But the point is that the denial makes the reception all the better later. So, then Miranda looks out and sees all these people. And again, we know up till this point she's not seen a ton of people. And she has this great little line. And, oh wonder, how many goodly creatures are there here? How beauteous mankind is. Oh, brave new world that has such people in it. And Prospero says, 'tis new to thee. You know, the brave new world, it's not necessarily new, but 'tis new to thee. And this line was so loved by an author whose name I can't think of at the moment that he named his book, his futuristic is it a dystopian? I don't know, it's a futuristic novel called Brave New World. It is named after Miranda's speech here. Okay. Alonso tells her that he owes her an apology for what he did to her. And again, I just love that it's not she's not forgotten in all this. But he says he owes her an apology for the treachery of 12 years ago, and embraces her as, his new daughter-in-law. And Prospero insists that all is forgiven. Yeah. So then, at this point, all of the loose ends get tied up, The mariners are fine. They've been sleeping this whole time because they weren't important to the plot. The ship is good as new. Ariel did not wreck it in the Tempest. Stefano and Trinculo are exposed as drunks. And the two of them in Caliban are released from the ghost spirit hounds. Ariel is finally set free. This whole thing is just sort of coming together. And Prospero talks about how he hopes to see his children married. The children, not his children. Ew, creepy. His daughter, see the children married, his daughter married, and then to go back to Milan, saying, where his every third thought shall be his grave. Just kind of a, dark, like, okay, I would really like my dukedom back so I can slowly die. It's weird. That's weird, but Alonso breezes past it, so let's do the same thing. Prospero, and is like, I want to hear this story. Like, he keeps reiterating, I want to hear this big old story about how you survived here and everything. And Prospero promises that he'll tell. And he also promises that there will be favorable weather and no more tempests. And tells Ariel that his new final task, after his 17 other final tasks, is to see to the weather and to make sure that they have good weather for sailing off. And as he does that, Ariel will be set free. Guys, we're at the end. Okay, so this is the epilogue. So they all are like, yes, we're going home. We're going to go back to Italy. But before it all finishes, the Act 5 finishes, and Prospero is left alone on stage. And he says this. Again, with the farewell to the stage and everything like that, it's really great, and that's why I put the whole dang thing here. But now my charms are all overthrown, and what strength I have is mine own, which is most faint. Now 'tis true. I must be here confined by you, or sent to Naples. He's telling the audience, like, I've let go of all my magical powers. Now it's up to you whether or not I get back to Naples. Let me not, since I have my dukedom got, and pardoned the deceiver, dwell in this bare island by your spell. So, don't let me stay stuck here, because I got my dukedom back, and I forgave everybody, like I should. So don't let me remain here on this island because of your enchantment now, but release me from my bands with the help of your good hands. Gentle breath of yours my sails must fill, or else my project fails, which was to please. Now I want spirits to enforce, art to enchant, and my ending is despair, unless I be relieved by prayer. And again, this is like, ties very much into the Christian, like, despair and goodwill and redemption and saving and forgiveness and everything. Which, unless I be relieved by prayer, which pierces so that it assaults mercy itself and frees all faults. As you from crimes would pardoned be, let your indulgence set me free. And so he's saying that the only way that he can be freed, the only way that, like Ariel, he can be freed and sent back to Naples because he's given up all of his powers, is if the audience applauds for him. It's so cute, right? Oh, it's so cute. It's really well done when you see it in person. I particularly adore the ending to this play. And it's a very, very apt ending for it being the final play that Shakespeare wrote. So, I believe your task for this week is to message me, And let me know, or maybe it was last week. If you haven't, definitely let me know what you're thinking of doing your final paper on. I'm here to help you, steer you in the right direction, get you some good resources, that sort of thing. That's what my job is. My job is to help you succeed. And I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed this play. I hope you enjoyed all of the plays. And that's it, guys. I'm going to stop talking now. But reach out if you need questions. If you need help and you have questions, you know where I am. And to end it, I'm going to leave you with this from The Office. Because I love The Office. And I love The Tempest. And this made me laugh very hard. Alright, that's it, guys. Goodbye.